It was still early when the sun began to climb above the pines, spilling pale light across the porch steps of our small Maine home. The world outside felt hushed, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. I just poured my first cup of coffee when I noticed the shape, square, brown, and out of place, resting against the welcome mat. At first I thought it was one of Evelyn's garden deliveries, another box of seeds or ceramic pots she loved ordering. But when I bent down, I saw my name printed in bold black ink. Raymond Anderson. No return address, just one neat line across the top. Happy Father's Day! A chill worked through my chest, not from the sea breeze, but from memory. Claire's handwriting was unmistakable. Even after years of silence, a father doesn't forget the shape of his child's letters. I stood there for a moment, staring at that box, the coffee cooling in my hand. Before we continue, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell icon, so you never miss a story like this one. Evelyn appeared behind me, her robe wrapped tight, her gray hair pulled back the way she wore it when something unsettled her. "Ray," she said softly, "don't touch it." "It's from Claire," I whispered. Her face tightened. "I can see that." We hadn't heard from our daughter in nearly 3 years. The last time she came by, she left with raised voices and slammed doors. Something about the inheritance from Helen's foundation fund, the one created after my late sister passed. She'd accused me of playing God with the money, as if honesty were a kind of cruelty. Evelyn stepped beside me and crouched to look closer. "No postage marks," she murmured. "Someone dropped it off by hand." The morning light caught her wedding ring as she brushed a bit of dust from the cardboard. "Ray, something's wrong." I nodded slowly. The air smelled of salt and dew, the way it did before a storm. Inside the house, the clock above the mantel ticked softly. Every sound felt exaggerated. The creak of the floorboards, the whistle of wind through the screen door. I carried the box into the living room and set it on the table. Evelyn followed, arms folded tight across her chest. "You're not really thinking about opening it, are you?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "She remembered Father's Day." "She remembered how to hurt you," Evelyn replied quietly. Her words stung because they were true. I'd spent decades teaching our daughter the difference between need and want, but in the end, she'd learned how to weaponize both. The box sat between us like a third presence. No sound came from it, no ticking, no movement, just silence heavy enough to bend the air. I reached for the pocket knife I kept near the fruit bowl, the one I used for trimming plants and opening mail. Evelyn placed her hand over mine. "Please, Ray, let's think. First." Her palm was warm, steady, the kind of touch that stills foolish impulses. I lowered the knife. "Maybe I'll call the post office," I said. "See if anyone dropped it off." Evelyn exhaled. "Good. Start there." But even as I spoke, I couldn't stop looking at the handwriting. There was something strange about it. Too deliberate, too practiced. Claire never wrote this carefully unless she wanted something. I set the knife aside and sat back, feeling the ache that comes from years of swallowing disappointment. "Do you think she's in trouble?" Evelyn hesitated. "If she were, she'd call. Not send that." The box seemed to breathe with the room's stillness. Sunlight crept slowly across its surface, tracing the letters of my name like fingers. I took another sip of coffee, though it had gone bitter. "Maybe I'll wait until after breakfast." Evelyn smiled faintly, the kind that hides fear behind patience. "You'll do what you always do. You'll think about everyone else first." Outside, gulls screamed somewhere over the bay, and the sound carried through the open window like a warning. I turned toward the sea, the horizon glowing with early gold, and wondered what kind of daughter sends silence wrapped in paper. The box sat untouched on the living room table, glowing faintly in the morning light like something alive. Evelyn had retreated to the kitchen, pretending to busy herself with breakfast, but I could tell her thoughts were still circling that package. Every clang of a plate, every scrape of a chair sounded sharper than it should have. Fear has a way of making ordinary sounds feel like alarms. I lowered myself into the armchair near the window and let the sea breeze move through the curtains. For a moment, I just watched the waves beyond the pines, the distant silver line where the water met the sky. Maine mornings always started like this. Still, cautious, half asleep, the kind of peace that never lasted long. Evelyn called out, "Coffee's getting cold again." "I'll warm it up later," I said. My voice sounded far away, even to me. What I didn't say was that the sight of Claire's handwriting had already taken me years back, to the day we lost Helen, my sister, and the quiet storm that followed. Claire had stood beside me at the funeral, eyes dry, her hands buried in her coat pockets. I remember thinking she looked angry, not sad. When the will was read a week later, it was as though someone had struck a match inside her. Helen had left part of her estate to a medical charity that helped patients afford hearing devices, her way of honoring the illness that took her too early. I'd been appointed trustee, a responsibility I took seriously, but to Claire it was a betrayal. "She didn't trust you enough," she'd said back then, so she hid behind paperwork. "No," I told her, "she trusted me to do what's right." That was the last honest conversation we ever had. Now, years later, the weight of that box felt like unfinished punishment. Evelyn returned to the living room, carrying 2 plates, toast, eggs, and a silence that pressed between us. She set my plate down gently and glanced at the parcel. "You're thinking too much again," she murmured. "I can't help it," I said. "It's the same feeling I had when she stopped calling." Evelyn sat beside me. She didn't stop calling, Ray. She stopped listening. Her words found a place inside me I'd been avoiding for years. I picked at the edge of the toast, watching crumbs gather on the plate. "She was my little girl," I said quietly. "You remember how she used to sit on my shoulders at the fair? She'd point at the carousel and shout, 'Faster, Dad! Faster!'" Evelyn smiled, though her eyes stayed sad. "I remember. She loved the music, not the ride." I looked at her confused. "She loved how everyone turned to watch when the lights came on," Evelyn said softly. "She liked being seen." The truth in that hit harder than I wanted to admit. Claire's need for attention had always been there, in her art, her career, even her fights. Maybe the box wasn't about love or forgiveness. Maybe it was her way of reminding me she still had power to make me look. I rose from the chair and walked to the table. The box stared back, silent, patient. "Maybe it's nothing," I said. "Maybe it's just a card." Evelyn's voice cut through the room. "Ray, a card doesn't come without postage. Someone brought that here." She was right. No label, no barcode, no receipt. Whoever delivered it had known exactly where to place it. Right where I'd find it first thing in the morning. I sat again, feeling that old ache behind my ribs, the one that came from hope pretending to be reason. "She knows I'd worry," I said. "She knows I'd overthink it." Evelyn reached for my hand. Maybe that's why she sent it. Her fingers were cool and steady against mine. After all these years, she could still read me like an open letter. "Don't let her drag you back into the same guilt," she said. "You've paid for mistakes that weren't even yours." I nodded, but my eyes stayed on the box. "It's not just curiosity, Ev. It's fear. Fear of what's inside. Fear that I'll recognize it." She didn't answer, and she didn't have to. Outside, the mail truck passed by, tires whispering against gravel. For a second, I almost ran out to ask if he'd seen anyone drop something off the night before. But then I stopped myself. The mystery had already done its work. It had turned our home into a waiting room. Evelyn rose and gathered the dishes. "I'll call Officer Miller," she said quietly. "He'll know what to do." I wanted to protest, but the truth was, I felt relief. If anyone could make sense of this, it was Miller. He'd known. Claire, since she was a teenager, had even coached her in the local softball league. Maybe he'd remember something I didn't. As Evelyn disappeared into the kitchen, I let my eyes return to the sea. The horizon shimmered now, sunlight scattering across the water. For a moment, it almost looked like forgiveness. But forgiveness, I'd learned, isn't always peace. Sometimes it's just the quiet before something breaks. And somewhere deep down, I knew whatever was inside that box wasn't meant to comfort me. It was meant to wake something I'd buried years ago. By the time the sun had climbed over the pine ridge, Evelyn was already on the phone with the local station. Officer Miller promised to stop by before noon. I tried to read the paper, but the letters swam. My eyes kept sliding back to that parcel on the table. The house smelled of toast and salt air. Gulls circled over the harbor, crying like restless thoughts. Every now and then I'd glance out the window, half expecting to see Claire's car in the drive. But the road stayed empty except for a mail truck crawling toward the corner. The sight pulled me upright. Old habits die slow. After 35 years at the Postal Service, the sound of tires on gravel still meant something to me. Order, schedule, trust. I stepped out onto the porch and waved. The carrier was a young man I'd seen a few times before. Tall, polite, maybe 25. His name badge read Ben Miller Jewer. I remembered now, Officer Miller's nephew. Small towns keep circles tight. "Mornin', Mr. Anderson," he called. "Got your regulars here. Couple of statements, an ad from the hardware store." I nodded, taking the bundle. "Ben, you work weekends?" He shrugged. "Rotating schedule, Father's Day deliveries and all." That word, Father's Day, hung between us like fog. I cleared my throat. "Listen, Ben, did you see anybody drop something here yesterday? Evening time, maybe?" He frowned. "Like what?" I pointed to the box, still sitting behind the screen door. "Came early this morning. No postage, no scan marks. Looks hand-delivered?" Ben stepped closer, squinting. "Yeah, I noticed that when I pulled up. That's not one of ours, sir. If it had gone through the system, it'd have a tracking strip right under the return corner." "So it didn't pass through any facility?" He shook his head. "Not from what I can tell. Private drop, maybe a courier service, but even those get labeled." Evelyn appeared behind me, arms folded. "You're sure, Ben?" "Yes, ma'am. We had no Father's Day packages logged for this route after 4 p.m. yesterday. If someone left it overnight, they knew you personally." That last sentence tightened something in my chest. Evelyn looked at me, then back at him. "Thank you, Ben. That helps?" He gave a friendly nod. "You folks all right?" "We're fine," I said, though my voice betrayed doubt. "We just got a strange delivery, that's all." Ben's gaze lingered on the box. "I can tell you one thing, Mr. Anderson. Whoever dropped it off wanted it found in daylight. Night moisture would have ruined the cardboard." He smiled politely, unaware of how heavy those words felt. After he left, the street returned to stillness, but the calm felt thinner now, like paper stretched too far. Evelyn turned to me. "Well? Well, what? You're thinking again," I sighed. "Ben's right. Whoever brought it knew our habits. Knew what time I fetched the paper." "Claire knows," she said softly. I looked away. "She also knows the key's still under the flower pot." Evelyn's breath caught. "She wouldn't—" "No," I said quickly, though doubt crept in. "She wouldn't need to come inside to hurt us." The sentence hung unfinished. We spent the next hour trying to pretend life was ordinary. Evelyn trimmed her roses while I mended a hinge on the porch gate, but neither of us spoke much. Every clink of my tools seemed to echo off that sealed box. Around 11, Officer Miller's cruiser rolled up the lane, blue lights flashing once in greeting. He stepped out. Same steady posture, same calm eyes I remembered from church. "Morning, Ray. Heard you've got a mystery parcel?" Inside, I set the box on the table again. Miller studied it carefully, running a gloved hand over the seam. "No return, no barcode," he murmured. "Mind if I lift it?" "Go ahead." He raised it slightly, then frowned. "Not heavy, but something's loose inside. Slides when you tilt it." Evelyn flinched. "Could it be dangerous?" Miller smiled gently. "If I thought it was explosive, I'd have cleared the house already. Still, we'll check it properly. We'll take it down to the station and x-ray it. Standard procedure. I hesitated, hand on the table edge. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep the mystery close, to see what my daughter thought was so important. But another part of me, the part that had buried too many regrets, knew Evelyn was right. Take it, I said. Better safe than sorry. Miller nodded. I'll have my guys run it this afternoon. You'll hear from me before supper. When he carried the parcel out, the house seemed to exhale. Evelyn leaned against the doorway, her shoulders sagging. Feels strange, she whispered, like giving away something that isn't ours. It's better this way, I said, but even as I said it, I felt hollow. The box was gone, yet its presence still clung to the air, like a word left unsaid. I walked to the porch and watched Miller's cruiser disappear down the lane. The sea shimmered in the distance, calm and unbothered. Maybe that's why I envied it. It never cared who brought what to its shore. Behind me, Evelyn called, "Ray, you think she'll ever come back?" I didn't answer, because somewhere inside I already knew. Claire never sent things to reconnect. She sent them to remind me how much she could still reach us, without showing her face. By late afternoon, the fog rolled in from the harbor, soft and gray, wrapping the town in a thin hush. Evelyn and I sat near the fireplace, neither of us speaking much. Every few minutes she'd glance at the clock. I'd do the same. The house felt emptier without that box sitting on the table, yet somehow heavier too. Around 5:30, the phone rang. Evelyn jumped. I reached for it, knowing before I even looked that it would be Officer Miller. "Ray," he said, his voice steady but quiet. "We finished the screening. You should come down here." "Is it dangerous?" "No," he said after a pause. "Not the way you're thinking, but you'll want to see it yourself." Evelyn stood in the doorway, watching my face. What did he say? I hung up slowly. "He wants us at the station." Her hands tightened around the back of a chair. "You're not opening it there, are you?" "I don't know yet," I said. "He said it's safe." The drive into town was short but silent. The streets were empty. Even the seagulls seemed to have gone quiet. The police station stood at the edge of the harbor, its windows glowing soft yellow against the gray dusk. Miller met us outside, a folder tucked under his arm, and the box sitting beside him on a metal table. He nodded to Evelyn first, respect in his eyes. Then he looked at me. "Ray, we ran a full X-ray and scan. No explosives, no chemicals. Just this inside." He lifted the box's lid carefully. Inside was a smaller tin case, about the size of a lunchbox, its surface scratched and dented. Resting on top was an envelope with my name written in the same careful script. Beneath it, something metal shifted faintly when the air moved. Evelyn's breath caught. "You said it wasn't dangerous?" "It's not," Miller assured her. "Just odd." He handed me the envelope. "Read it here if you'd like." The paper was heavy, expensive, the kind Claire used when she was younger for her art prints. I slid my thumb beneath the flap and unfolded the note. "For Dad, finally, the truth. You always said you wanted honesty. So here it is, wrapped in the silence you taught me to live with." My throat tightened. The words looked rehearsed. Every letter deliberate, every line carefully cruel. Evelyn took the note, reading over my shoulder. "She sounds angry." "She always does when she's guilty," I murmured. Miller tapped the tin box gently. "We didn't open this yet. Thought you might want to see it first." The sound it made, a soft metallic slide, sent a strange shiver through me. "Go ahead," I said. He pulled at the latch, slow and cautious. Inside lay a silver flash drive, a single key and a smaller folded note. He passed it to me with a gloved hand. "Play the drive. The key. We'll make sense after." Evelyn shook her head. "This feels wrong, Ray." "I know," I said, "but we've come this far." Miller plugged the flash drive into a station computer. The screen flickered, then displayed a folder named Helen's Fund. Evelyn's eyes widened. "Oh, Ray." The first file opened automatically, a set of scanned banking records, withdrawal slips, all signed in looping cursive. Claire's handwriting again. Each document showed transfers, small at first, then larger, all traced to accounts under her name. I stared at the monitor as if it might change. She took it, I whispered. All of it. Evelyn covered her mouth. Miller leaned back, expression grim but sympathetic. It appears she moved portions over several years. Everything looked legitimate until you checked the dates. The charity never received the full amount. I couldn't speak. The room tilted. Or maybe it was just the weight of disappointment. The second file was a video. Short, barely 20 seconds. Claire standing somewhere bright, maybe a gallery, her hair longer, her smile practiced. "Happy Father's Day," she said under the camera. "You always said honesty mattered more than anything. So here's mine. I took what you wouldn't give me, and you can't stop me now." The video ended abruptly. No laughter, no apology, just that last look, a stare that felt like punishment. Evelyn turned away, tears forming silently. Why would she do this? I didn't answer. I just kept looking at the paused frame, her face frozen mid-breath, proud and hollow. Miller shut the laptop gently. "We'll make copies of everything for evidence. You don't have to decide what to do tonight." But I already knew. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about the silence she wanted me to live in, the same silence she used to mock. Evelyn squeezed my hand. "Ray, let's go home." I nodded, gathering the papers and the key. As I stood, Miller placed a hand on my shoulder. "You've always been a good man," he said quietly. "Don't let this change that." Outside, the fog had thickened into mist, swallowing the harbor lights. The air smelled of iron and salt. Evelyn walked beside me, clutching her coat against the cold. Neither of us spoke. The truth had already done its speaking. Back home, I placed the key on the mantel and sat in my chair, staring at it until the room went dark. The house didn't feel like ours anymore that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the wind through the shutters carried the same question. Why? Evelyn sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched. The steam had long since vanished, but she held it like it was the only warm thing left in the room. I stood near the window, watching the fog drift across the fields. The key from the box glinted faintly on the mantel, catching the light each time the fire flickered. Neither of us spoke. There wasn't much left to say that hadn't already been said years ago. "She must have planned it for months," Evelyn whispered finally. "Maybe years." "She did," I said quietly. Every withdrawal was spaced out, small enough to go unnoticed. Smart, calculated. "Don't call her smart," Evelyn snapped, then immediately softened. "I'm sorry. I just can't understand what kind of person sends something like that on Father's Day." I turned toward her, the kind that wants control again, even from a distance. She met my eyes. "You think she wants you to fight back?" I nodded slowly. "She's baiting me. She's always needed to know she still matters." The words tasted bitter. It was strange, realizing that love and control can wear the same face. Evelyn set the mug down, the sound sharp against the wood. "What about the key?" I looked at it again. "I don't know. But it's not random. Could it be for her apartment? A storage unit?" "Maybe," I said, "but that's not her style. She'd want symbolism, something that twists the knife." Evelyn's eyes softened. "Ray, she's still your daughter." "Yes," I said quietly. "And that's what makes this hurt more than anything." The clock on the wall ticked softly, its rhythm filling the silence that followed. I'd spent my whole life believing that time healed everything. Tonight, it felt more like time was the weapon, sharp, unrelenting, cutting deeper with every second that passed. When the phone rang, Evelyn jumped again. I reached for it, expecting Miller, but the screen showed a number I hadn't seen in years. Claire. My hand froze above the receiver. Evelyn's face went pale. "Don't," she whispered. I answered anyway. There was a long pause on the other end. Static, breathing, then her voice. "You got it." I swallowed hard. "Yes. Good." "Why?" I asked. She laughed softly. You always ask that like it matters. It matters to me. Well, it shouldn't anymore, she said. You made your choice a long time ago. This is mine. Her voice had that same edge it always carried, the calm of someone who'd already decided she was the victim. You sent me stolen money, I said. You sent me evidence of your own crime. I sent you truth, she replied. You hid behind Helen's name, behind paperwork and guilt. I just took back what was mine. Yours? I said quietly. It was never yours, Claire. It was her last wish. She went silent for a moment, then softer. You'll never understand. The line went dead. I stood there listening to the dial tone hum in my ear until Evelyn gently took the phone from my hand. Ray, she whispered, let it go. But I couldn't, not anymore. I walked to the mantel, picked up the key, and turned it in my hand. A small number was engraved near the handle. 47B. I recognized it instantly. Her old storage locker, I said. Evelyn's face fell. You're not thinking, I need to see what's inside. No, she said firmly. Whatever's in there, it's only going to hurt you more. Maybe, I said, but if I don't look, I'll keep imagining worse. Her voice broke. Ray, she wants you to open it. She wants the control again. I met her eyes. Then maybe it's time I take it back. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the eaves. I grabbed my coat and the flashlight from the drawer. Evelyn followed me to the door, her hand trembling on my sleeve. Please, she whispered, don't go alone. I'll be fine. It's just a box, remember? But we both knew it wasn't just a box. It was the past. Sealed, heavy, waiting. The storage facility sat on the edge of town, a row of metal units gleaming dull under the streetlights. I parked by the gate, my headlights cutting through the mist. The number 47B was near the back. When I slid the key into the lock, it turned too easily, as if someone had used it recently. The door creaked open, and the beam of my flashlight swept across the space. Stacks of old furniture, boxes labeled in Claire's handwriting, paintings wrapped in brown paper. Nothing unusual, until I saw the open envelope taped to the far wall. It held one photograph. Me and Evelyn, taken years ago at Helen's Foundation Gala. On the back, a single line. Everything you built was mine to break. My knees went weak. The flashlight trembled in my hand. Behind me, the door creaked shut, the sound echoing like finality. The air inside the storage unit was damp and stale, carrying the faint scent of dust and turpentine. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, gliding over the stacked boxes and faded furniture. The photograph on the wall swayed slightly, caught by the draft from the half-open door. I stepped closer. The edges of the picture were curling. The tape yellowed with age. Evelyn's smile in that photo looked younger, softer, untouched by the kind of grief we now lived with. I touched the corner lightly, careful not to tear it. Behind it was another envelope, thin, white, and sealed. I tore it open with a trembling hand. Inside, a single page. Dad, you once told me, truth lives in silence, but all I ever heard was you choosing her silence over me. I grew up waiting for you to speak, to see me, to notice. Instead, you handed my future to a charity, named after someone who wasn't even your blood. You called it love. I called it theft. I used to imagine this moment, the day you'd finally listen. So here's the truth you wanted. I took the money because you never gave me anything else that felt like mine. Claire. My chest tightened, each word sinking like a stone. I leaned against the cold metal wall, closing my eyes. It wasn't the accusation. That hurt. It was the echo of pain I could almost understand. For years, I'd believed silence was the most respectful kind of love. You don't argue, you don't force, you wait. I thought I was being patient. But reading that letter, I realized what she'd heard instead. Absence. Evelyn's voice came faintly from outside the door. Ray, are you in there? I turned as she stepped in, her flashlight trembling slightly. When her beam found my face, her expression shifted. "Oh, Ray." I handed her the letter. She read it quietly, lips pressed tight. When she finished, she folded it carefully and held it to her chest. "She's not wrong about everything," she said softly. I blinked at her. "You can't mean that." "She's wrong about what she did," Evelyn said, "but not about how she felt. You did hide behind silence. After Helen died, after Claire left, you closed the door, Ray. You thought protecting her meant staying calm. But sometimes calm looks like indifference." Her words hit deeper than I wanted to admit. "I didn't know what else to do," I said. "Every word felt like it would make things worse." Evelyn stepped closer, her hand warm on my arm. "Then maybe this is what she wanted, to make you finally speak." I stared down at the letter again. "Speak to her? Or about her?" "Both," she said simply. We stood there in the narrow light, surrounded by relics of the past. Claire's old art supplies, a cracked piano bench, the bicycle she'd begged for one summer and never rode more than twice. Each item felt like a ghost, whispering that time doesn't erase. It just buries. "I don't think she wanted forgiveness," I said finally. "I think she wanted to wound me the way she thought I wounded her." Evelyn nodded. "That's how hurt people try to love." I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my coat pocket. Miller was right. It's not about danger. It's about punishment. "Punishment for what?" Evelyn asked quietly. "For being a father she couldn't forgive," I said. We turned to leave, but as I reached for the latch, something on the floor caught my eye. A small black notebook half buried under a tarp. I picked it up. On the first page, in Claire's handwriting, was a single phrase repeated over and over. "He didn't listen." Dozens of pages filled with it, the same sentence scratched in ink until the paper tore in places. I felt Evelyn's hand slip into mine. "Ray, let's go home," she whispered. Outside, the mist had turned to drizzle. The world looked gray and blurred, as if the rain itself was ashamed of what it had seen. We walked back to the car in silence. During the drive, Evelyn held my hand the entire way. Neither of us turned on the radio. The only sound was the hum of the tires against wet asphalt. When we reached home, I placed the letter and the notebook on the table. The fire had gone out, leaving only cold ash. Evelyn disappeared upstairs for a blanket, and I sat there staring at the ink-stained pages, wondering how many times a daughter had to write the same words before she stopped hoping they'd be heard. When Evelyn returned, she laid the blanket over my shoulders. "What now?" she asked. I stared into the darkness. "Now," I said. "I start talking." She smiled sadly. "To her?" "To someone," I said. "Even if she never listens, I need to remember what my voice sounds like." The room was quiet again, but it wasn't the same kind of silence anymore. It was the kind that follows confession. Not peace, but release. I took one last look at the letter before folding it shut. Her anger was written in ink, but her loneliness lived between the lines, and for the first time in years, I didn't see her as an enemy. I saw her as a wound that had learned how to write. The next morning arrived gray and slow. I hadn't slept. The letter and the black notebook still lay on the table where I'd left them. The words, "He didn't listen," staring at me through the half-light. Evelyn moved quietly around the kitchen, her robe brushing the floor like a sigh. Neither of us said much. There wasn't anything left to soften what we already knew. By 8:30, I was on the road. The fog lifted in thin ribbons as I drove toward Margaret Hale's office, one of those weather-beaten Victorian houses that had been turned into a small law practice. Margaret had been a friend of Helen's before she was my attorney. She was older than me by a few years, silver hair, straight posture, and the kind of eyes that still missed nothing. When I stepped inside, the brass bell above the door chimed. She looked up from a stack of papers and smiled faintly. "Ray Anderson," she said. "It's been too long. Trouble or nostalgia?" "Bit of both," I said. "Can I sit?" "Of course." She motioned to the chair across from her desk. "You sound tired." I am. I slid the flash drive, the printed records, and the letter across the desk. It's about Claire. Margaret adjusted her glasses, scanning each page. The room was silent except for the soft crackle of the space heater. When she finally looked up, her expression had changed from curiosity to quiet understanding. She took from Helen's fund, she said. Yes. And then sent you the proof. Yes. Margaret folded her hands. That's not theft. That's a confession disguised as revenge. I leaned back. So what do I do with it? She studied me. That depends. Do you want justice or peace? I thought they were the same thing. She smiled sadly. Rarely. After a pause, she added, if you press charges, you'll get the money back. Maybe even see her face in court. But you'll lose what's left of the relationship. If you stay quiet, she'll think she won. She already does, I said. Margaret nodded slowly. Then make her silence cost her. No confrontation, no anger, just consequence. She pulled a legal pad from her drawer and began writing. We'll reopen the charitable trust under your sole authority. File a fraud claim through the bank's insurance branch. It'll trigger a review of all her linked accounts. Quietly, no headlines. Will that hurt her? I asked. It'll teach her, Margaret said. She used paperwork to take what wasn't hers. Let paperwork take it back. Her pen moved quickly, deliberate strokes of justice written in ink instead of emotion. Watching her, I felt something loosen inside me, the first trace of control in weeks. When she finished, she slid the notepad across the desk. Sign here and here. I'll handle the rest. I hesitated. Part of me wants to call her. Ask why she thought this would fix anything. Margaret met my eyes. Because you raised her to believe honesty always fixes things, she just confused honesty with destruction. Her words hit with quiet precision. I signed the papers. As I was leaving, Margaret stopped me at the door. Ray, one more thing. I turned. Yes? She's not the only one who needs to make amends. Write her a letter, not for her, for you. Leave it unsent if you must, but use your own words this time. Don't let silence have the last say. I nodded, pocketed the folder, and stepped outside. The air smelled of rain and seaweed. Across the street, a church bell tolled the noon hour, each note echoing through the mist. Driving home, I felt something new, a strange mix of sorrow and purpose. The anger was gone, replaced by something quieter, steadier. Margaret was right. I didn't need to shout. I just needed to act. When I pulled into the driveway, Evelyn was sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in a shawl. She looked up as I got out of the car. Did you find what you needed? I found someone who remembers who I used to be, I said. She smiled faintly. That's a start. Inside, I placed Margaret's documents beside Claire's letter. 2 sides of the same story, one written in guilt, the other in law. I poured myself a cup of coffee, black and strong, and let the steam rise against the gray window. Somewhere out on the bay, a foghorn moaned, low and distant. It sounded less like warning now, more like direction. For the first time since that package arrived, I felt certain of what came next. Justice didn't need noise. It only needed patience. And patience, I realized, was something I still had plenty of. For the first time in weeks, I woke to the sound of rain instead of my own thoughts. The storm had rolled in overnight, tapping gently against the windows. Evelyn was still asleep beside me, her breathing steady. I lay there for a while, listening to the rhythm, letting it fill the space where anxiety used to live. By mid-morning, she'd gone into town for groceries. I made coffee, black and bitter, and sat at the kitchen table with Margaret's folder spread before me. Each document was precise, simple. No drama, no revenge speech. Just paperwork, doing what anger never could. Margaret had once told me, there's no louder punishment than peace. Now, I finally understood what she meant. I filled out the first form, a request to reopen Helen's charitable trust. My signature felt heavier than usual, as though every stroke of the pen was rewriting the past. Then came the affidavit confirming the discrepancies. For years, I'd signed papers for Claire's birthdays, her loans, her little requests. Signing this felt different, not as a father, but as a man reclaiming himself. By noon, I was at the local branch of the bank. The manager, a quiet man named Mr. Carver, met me in his office. He'd known Helen, too. Everyone here had. "Ray," he said gently, scanning the documents, "I remember these accounts. This will take a few days to process, but I'll notify the insurance team today. You're certain you want to pursue this?" I nodded. "Completely." He hesitated. "She's your daughter." "She was," I said. "Now she's just another name on a file." Carver didn't argue. He stamped the documents, slid them into a folder, and said, "Then let's begin." When I stepped back outside, the rain had softened into drizzle. The sky was clearing, pale light breaking through clouds. I pulled up my collar and walked to the car. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt direction. On the drive home, I passed the post office, the same one where I'd worked for 35 years. Through the glass, I could see Ben Miller Jr., sorting packages behind the counter. He looked up, saw me, and waved. For a second, I almost stopped. I wanted to tell him something simple, something he might remember years from now. Don't ever mistake quiet for weakness. But I didn't. Some lessons find their own way. At home, Evelyn was in the kitchen unpacking groceries. She looked up as I entered. "You went out early." "I had to sign some papers," I said. She studied me. "You look lighter." "I guess I am," I said. "Margaret was right. Silence can heal or destroy. Depends who's holding it." Evelyn came closer, brushing the rain from my coat sleeve. "You're sure this is the right thing?" "Yes," I said. "But it's not about being right anymore. It's about being done." She smiled faintly. "That sounds like you." That afternoon, we sat by the fire, the rain fading into mist beyond the window. I watched the smoke curl upward, dissolving into the chimney like memory. Evelyn read quietly beside me, occasionally glancing over, as if checking that I was still here. For the first time since the package arrived, I felt something like peace. Not because justice had begun, but because I'd stopped waiting for her to apologize. Evening fell soft and blue. I poured myself a glass of scotch and stepped onto the porch. The air smelled of wet cedar and the distant sea. Across the bay, a light flickered in one of the cottages, probably a fisherman checking his nets before dawn. The world kept moving, uncaring, unbothered. It was a good reminder that pain doesn't stop the tide. Inside, the phone rang once, a short buzz that cut through the quiet. Evelyn picked up. "Hello?" Her voice stayed calm. "Yes, he's here. Who's calling?" She turned toward me. "It's her." I took the receiver. "Claire?" A pause, then her voice, low and cold. "You're reopening it, aren't you?" "Yes," I said. "Do you think that'll change anything?" "No," I replied, "but it'll remind you that silence isn't consent." She laughed softly, a sound I remembered from when she was little. That short, mocking laugh she used whenever she thought she'd outsmarted me. "You think this makes you noble? It just makes you lonely." "I've been lonely for years," I said. "Now at least it's honest." She didn't answer. The line clicked dead. Evelyn walked over and rested a hand on my shoulder. "She's spiraling." "She's scared," I said. "People like her mistake fear for anger." We stood there together, the firelight dancing across the walls. I knew Margaret would handle the rest, the claims, the freezes, the quiet reversal of everything Claire thought she owned. My part was finished. There was nothing left to do but wait. And waiting, I realized, wasn't weakness. It was discipline. Before bed, I opened the small notebook again. The words, "He didn't listen," stared back at me, page after page. I traced one line with my finger and whispered, "I'm listening now, Claire. You just waited too long to speak." Then I closed the book and turned off the light. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The night was still, the sea calm. Justice was already on its way, moving slowly, quietly, like the tide. 2 days passed before the phone rang again. The house had gone back to its usual rhythm. Coffee in the morning, Evelyn reading by the fire, me staring out at the bay pretending to think about the weather. But that peace felt temporary, like the calm before thunder. When the call came, it was mid-afternoon. The sky outside was pale and brittle, the kind of light that makes every color look tired. Evelyn was folding laundry when the phone rang, and we both froze at the sound. We didn't have to guess who it was. I picked up. "Hello?" Her voice was sharp, trembling. "You really did it, didn't you?" "Hello to you too, Claire. I just got off the phone with the bank," she said. "They froze my accounts, all of them. I can't even pay my rent." I leaned back in my chair. "Then maybe you should call your lawyer." "You think this is funny?" she hissed. "No," I said evenly. "I think it's overdue." There was silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, quick, uneven. Then she said, "You don't get to do this to me. You're my father." "I used to be," I said quietly. Her voice cracked. "You're ruining my life." "You already did that," I replied. "You just left the receipts." She went silent again. Somewhere behind her I could hear street noise. A car horn, the distant buzz of city traffic. She'd always hated small towns. She once said the silence here made her feel trapped. I used to think she meant boredom. Now I understood she meant accountability. After a long pause, she said, "You think this makes you better than me?" "No, Claire," I said softly. "It makes me free." She laughed, but it wasn't cruel this time. It was hollow. "Free from what?" "From waiting for you to be someone you're not." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said something I hadn't expected. "Mom would have hated you for this." I closed my eyes. "Helen would have told you to stop before it came to this." "She always took your side." "No," I said. "She took the side of decency. You just never wanted to be on it." Her breathing slowed. I could almost hear her trying to decide whether to cry or scream. Finally she whispered, "You really think I deserve this?" "Yes," I said, "and that's why it hurts to say it." I waited for her to hang up. Instead, her voice broke through again. Small, almost childlike. "You were supposed to protect me, Dad." "I did," I said, "from everyone but yourself." The line went dead. I set the phone down gently. Evelyn had stopped folding clothes. She stood by the window, her reflection pale in the glass. She called again? "She's unraveling," I said. Evelyn turned toward me. "Do you feel better?" "No," I said, "just lighter. There's a difference." That night I sat alone on the porch with a glass of whiskey and the sound of crickets. The sky was clear now, the stars bright enough to show their reflections on the still water. The tide was low, bare sand stretching like memory across the bay. Margaret called later to confirm the bank's actions had gone through completely. "The insurance board has ruled in your favor," she said. "Every cent she moved will be recovered within 10 days. Legally, she's boxed in. Will she face charges?" "Only if she pushes," Margaret said. My advice? Let her drown in silence. I thanked her. After the call, I sat there listening to the night breathe. It wasn't joy I felt. It was balance, the kind that comes after years of imbalance. Claire's noise had filled my life for too long. Now the quiet sounded like forgiveness, even if it wasn't. Evelyn joined me after a while, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders. "You know," she said softly, "I used to pray you'd talk to her again. Someday." "I did," I said. "It just wasn't the conversation either of us wanted." "She might come back," Evelyn whispered. "She might," I said. "But if she does, she'll have to knock." Evelyn smiled faintly. "I think Helen would be proud of you." "I'm not sure proud is the word," I said. "Maybe relieved." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of salt and pine. I leaned back in my chair, letting the stillness settle around me. Somewhere out on the horizon, lightning flickered silently behind the clouds, distant, harmless, but a reminder of what storms look like once they've passed. I realized then that I wasn't angry anymore, just tired in a good way. the kind that comes after finishing something that needed doing for too long. Inside, the clock ticked toward midnight. Evelyn touched my arm. "Come to bed, Ray." "In a minute," I said, just watching the tide come back. She nodded and went inside. I sat there a little longer, staring at the dark water. When I finally rose to go in, I caught my reflection in the window. For the first time in years, the man looking back didn't seem weighed down. He just looked finished. 3 days after our last call, the storm came in from the Atlantic. Not the kind that rattles windows or tears branches from trees. This one was steady, deliberate, the kind that lingers for days and forces you to sit still with your thoughts. The sky was low and heavy, the sea restless but measured, like it had something on its mind. I spent most of the morning sitting by the fire, watching rain bead down the window pane. Evelyn moved quietly around the house, humming now and then, a habit she picked up when she didn't want to say what she was thinking. By noon, I'd read the same paragraph of the newspaper 5 times without taking in a word. Finally, I folded it and stared at the fire. "Do you ever wonder if peace is supposed to feel this heavy?" Evelyn looked up from her knitting. "What do you mean?" "I thought when this was over I'd feel fixed, but it's just quiet, like everything's waiting for something else to happen." She smiled faintly. "Peace isn't a prize, Ray. It's a habit. You have to practice it." Her words landed softly, the way her truths always did. I nodded, staring at the flames. The phone rang just after lunch. I reached for it, half expecting silence on the other end again. Instead, it was Margaret Hale. "Ray," she said, "I wanted to update you. The restitution went through this morning. The funds have been restored to the trust. You're officially clear of liability." I let out a slow breath. "So it's done." "It's done," she said. "But there's more. Claire's attorney reached out. She's in some financial trouble, eviction, unpaid fees. He said she wanted to speak with you." I rubbed my temples. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him I'd ask," Margaret said gently. "She's your daughter, Ray. Whether you answer is up to you." When I hung up, Evelyn was watching me from across the room. She didn't have to ask. "It's her," she said. I nodded. "Margaret says she wants to talk." Evelyn's expression was calm but firm. "And do you?" "I don't know," I said. "Maybe I just want to see if she can still tell the truth." "Truth isn't her problem anymore," Evelyn said. "Shame is." That evening I sat on the porch, the rain easing into mist. The sea was calm again, the kind of stillness that feels earned. The phone sat on the table beside me, the receiver heavy in my hand. I dialed her number slowly. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Dad?" Her voice was small, unfamiliar. "I heard you wanted to talk," I said. A pause. Then, "I lost everything. The apartment, the job, everything." "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "No, you're not," she snapped, but her anger sounded tired. "You think this is justice, don't you?" "No," I said. "Justice would have been letting you face prison. I settled for mercy." Her breath hitched. "Mercy?" "You're still free," I said. "That's mercy enough." Another pause, then softer. "What do you want me to do, Dad?" I closed my eyes. Rain tapped gently against the railing. "I don't want you to do anything. I just want you to understand." "Understand what?" "That I didn't stop loving you," I said. "I just stopped protecting your mistakes." There was a long silence. Then I heard her sob, quiet, broken, real. "I don't know how to fix any of this." "Neither do I," I said. "But you start by not running from it." She didn't answer. When the line finally went quiet, I knew she was still there, listening, and that was enough. After a while, I said, "Good night, Claire," and hung up. Inside, Evelyn was waiting by the fire. "How was it? Honest," I said. "For once," she smiled sadly. "Then that's enough for tonight." We sat together, the firelight flickering across the walls, rain whispering outside. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. but it was the closest we'd ever been to it. Later that night, when I went to bed, I dreamed of Helen. She stood on the porch in her favorite blue dress, looking out at the water. She didn't speak, but I heard her voice anyway. Soft, patient, proud. In the dream, she turned toward me and said, "You did it right this time, Ray. You listened." I woke just before dawn, the storm finally gone. The air smelled clean, the world washed and waiting. Downstairs, Evelyn was already at the stove, making breakfast. The fire had burned low but steady. She turned as I entered and smiled. "Sleep any better?" "Better," I said. The rain helped. She poured coffee into my mug. "You know," she said, "storms don't come to destroy, Ray. Sometimes they just clear the air." I looked out the window at the brightening horizon. Then I guess it's time to breathe again. And for the first time in a long time, I did. It had been a week since the storm cleared, but the scent of rain still lingered in the air. The days had grown quieter, softer. Even the gulls seemed to cry less. The house felt lighter too, like it had exhaled something it had been holding in for too long. Evelyn noticed it first. "You're humming again," she said one morning as we sat on the porch. I hadn't realized I was. The tune was something from years ago, a song Helen used to hum when she was cleaning the kitchen on Sunday afternoons. I smiled faintly. Guess I finally remembered the words. "You sound like yourself again," she said. "Feels strange, doesn't it? After all this time." She nodded, and for a while we just sat there, watching the waves roll in slow and calm against the rocks. The past few weeks had stretched something inside me, something old, something stubborn. I wasn't sure if it was healing or simply getting used to the ache. That afternoon, when Evelyn left to visit a neighbor, I went into my study. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. On the desk sat a stack of envelopes, a fountain pen, and a clean sheet of paper. I stared at it for a long time before writing the first line. "Claire." The pen hesitated as if waiting to see if I really meant it. I took a deep breath and continued. "I've started this letter 100 times in my head and thrown it away before I finished the first sentence. Margaret told me to write to you, not to send it, just to let the words exist somewhere other than inside me. So here it is. You were right about one thing. I did stop listening. I thought patience was love, that silence was protection. But I see now it looked like distance, maybe even indifference. I'm sorry for that. But you were wrong too. What I built in Helen's name wasn't to erase you. It was to honor the part of her that believed people could be saved if someone simply cared enough to help them. That's what I wanted you to see, Claire. That compassion doesn't have to be loud to be real." I paused, the sound of the rain gutter dripping outside keeping time with my thoughts. "You took something sacred, and maybe you needed to see how much it meant. I can forgive that. What I can't forgive, at least not yet, is the way you turned your hurt into a weapon. Love isn't supposed to draw blood, even when it's angry. Still, you're my daughter. You'll always be the child who used to fall asleep on my chest while Helen read to you. That's who I write this to. Not the woman who sent the package, but the girl who once believed the world was kind. If you ever want to find me, I'll be here. Not waiting, not begging, but here, with the same old porch light Helen insisted we never turn off. Because home isn't forgiveness, it's endurance. And some lights stay on even when no one's coming back. Dad." When I finished, I sat back and read it twice. My handwriting had changed over the years, shakier, smaller, but the words felt solid. It wasn't a plea, and it wasn't a goodbye. It was simply the truth I should have spoken years ago. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it into an envelope, and sealed it. Then I wrote her name across the front, just her first name. No address, no stamp. I placed it in the top drawer of my desk beside the old black notebook. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the two of them side by side. The anger she wrote and the understanding I finally did. Later that evening, Evelyn found me on the porch again, the light from the setting sun falling warm across the floorboards. She handed me a cup of tea. "You wrote it, didn't you?" I nodded. "Didn't send it." "Good," she said. "Some things are meant to stay between paper and conscience." We sat quietly as the sun dipped lower, the water reflecting bands of pink and gold. I thought about Claire somewhere out there, maybe struggling, maybe changing, maybe just trying to breathe in her own silence. Evelyn broke the stillness. "What did you tell her?" "That the light's still on," I said. She smiled softly. "Then she'll find her way home when she's ready." The sky darkened, stars beginning to bloom over the horizon. For the first time, I didn't feel like something was missing. I'd spoken what needed saying, even if no one ever heard it. Inside the study, the letter sat quiet and still, sealed but alive, like forgiveness itself, waiting for time to catch up. Autumn came early that year. The mornings turned crisp, and the maples by the road began to flame orange and red against the gray-blue sky. The air smelled of salt and wood smoke. I could tell the tourist season was ending, the town growing quiet again, the way it always did after summer. I liked it better that way. Peace doesn't need an audience. Evelyn and I settled into our small routines. The morning walk to the harbor, the crossword after lunch, the quiet evenings by the fire. Some days it almost felt like the world had been rewound to an earlier, gentler time. Other days the past still knocked faintly on the walls of my memory, but not loud enough to break through. Every night before bed, I turned on the porch light. It had become habit now, something simple but sacred. Helen used to say a home without light was a house that had stopped hoping. So I kept it on. For her, for Evelyn, and maybe in some way for Claire, too. One evening, about 2 months after the last storm, I was sitting on the porch with a book when I heard footsteps on the gravel. At first I thought it was Ben Miller making his usual evening deliveries, but when I looked up, I saw a figure standing by the gate. Still hesitant, almost afraid to move. It was Claire. She was thinner than I. Remembered, her hair tied back, her coat too big. For a long moment, neither of us said a word. The light from the porch haloed her face, catching the edges of eyes I'd known all my life. "Hi, Dad," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I closed the book, heart steady but heavy. "Hi, Claire." She took a small step forward. "Can I come in?" I nodded once. "The door's open." She hesitated before walking up the path. I could hear her shoes crunching against the gravel, a sound that felt both foreign and familiar. When she reached the porch, she didn't sit. She stood by the railing, looking out toward the sea. "I didn't think you'd still live here," she said quietly. "I don't move much these days." Her eyes darted toward the window where Evelyn's shadow passed briefly. "She's still here?" "She is. I used to hate how calm she was," Claire said. "I thought it meant she didn't care." "She cared," I said. "She just didn't panic about the things she couldn't fix." Claire nodded slowly. The silence that followed wasn't tense this time. It was something softer, a shared exhaustion. Finally, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I found this when I was cleaning out my apartment," she said. "It's from Mom. I don't remember when she wrote it." She handed it to me. The paper was old, yellowed around the edges. Helen's handwriting, soft, looping, unmistakable. My throat tightened as I unfolded it. "If you're reading this, Claire, it means life has hurt you in ways I hoped it wouldn't. Don't let it turn you bitter. Anger feels powerful, but it burns through the hands that hold it. If you ever find your way back home, forgive your father. He doesn't say much, but his silence has always been made of love." I folded the letter carefully and looked up. Claire's eyes were wet. "I didn't know she left that for me," she said. "She probably knew you'd find it when you needed it," I said. She wiped her cheek. "I don't expect you to forgive me." "I already did," I said softly. "The night I stopped being angry." She looked down. "I don't know how to start over." "Starting over's easy," I said. "It's staying different that's hard." She gave a faint smile. "You always have a line for everything." I've had a lot of quiet to think them up. Evelyn opened the door then, her voice warm but steady. You'll both catch cold out there. Come in. Claire hesitated, then stepped inside. I followed. The smell of soup drifted from the kitchen, the kind of scent that can make even regret feel temporary. Evelyn set another bowl on the table without a word. Claire looked at her, unsure. Evelyn simply said, Sit, dear. And she did. Dinner was quiet but peaceful. No apologies, no explanations. Just the simple act of sharing a meal, the first we'd had, together in years. Every small sound, the clink of spoons, the soft crackle of the fire, felt like its own kind of prayer. When Claire finally stood to leave, she stopped by the door. I don't know if I can fix everything, she said, but I want to try. That's all you ever needed to do, I said. She looked back once more, her face half lit by the porch light. You never turned it off, she whispered. No, I said. That was the point. When the door closed behind her, Evelyn slipped her arm through mine. We watched through the window as Claire's figure disappeared into the darkness. The light spilled across the yard, glowing softly against the mist. She'll be back, Evelyn said. I know. Outside, the tide was coming in again, slow and steady, the same way forgiveness does when you stop resisting it. I turned off the living room lamp, but not the porch light. That one, I decided, would stay on. Always.